Billionaire pretended he couldn't walk. Until the Maid's toddler girl hugged him. Marcus Hale had everything money could buy. At 34, he owned 3 companies, a mansion with 22 rooms, and a wheelchair he did not need. Nobody knew his secret. Not his doctors. Not his business partners. Not even his own mother, who had stopped visiting 2 years ago because she said the house felt like a tomb. The truth was simple and strange. Marcus could walk. His legs worked just fine. But 3 years ago, on a rainy October night, he had made a choice that broke something inside him, and since that night, he had not taken a single step. It started after the accident. His wife, Diane, and their unborn daughter had died in a car crash. Marcus was driving. He walked away with only a broken wrist. The guilt was so heavy that some part of his mind decided his legs did not deserve to work anymore. A doctor might call it a conversion disorder, a mind so wounded it convinces the body to stop. Marcus never bothered with the name. He just knew he could not make himself stand up. And after the first year, when a specialist quietly told him in private that there was nothing physically wrong with his spine or his nerves, Marcus made a choice. He decided to stay in the chair. It was easier that way. People did not expect anything from a man in a wheelchair. They did not ask him to move forward with his life. They did not ask him to smile or date again or hope again. The chair became his shield. Behind it, he could hide from a world he no longer trusted. His housekeeper of 10 years, a stern woman named Margaret, had recently retired. The new hire was a young single mother named Elena Cruz, 30 years old, quiet, hardworking, with tired eyes that still held kindness in them. She needed the job badly. Her husband had left when their daughter was born, and daycare cost more than she could afford on a maid's salary. So on her first day, she asked Mr. Hale's assistant a nervous question. "Would it be all right if I brought my daughter sometimes? She's very quiet. She won't be any trouble." The assistant almost said no. Mr. Hale did not like surprises. He did not like noise. He barely spoke to the household staff at all. But Elena looked so desperate, so afraid of losing this chance, that the assistant said yes, just this once, and hoped for the best. That is how, on a Tuesday morning in March, a 3-year-old girl named Lily walked into the coldest house she had ever seen, holding her mother's hand and clutching a stuffed rabbit with one ear chewed soft from years of love. Marcus was in the study when he heard it. Small footsteps. A child's laugh, sudden and bright, echoing down a hallway that had not heard laughter in 3 years. He rolled his wheelchair to the doorway and looked out, annoyed, ready to tell Elena that children were not part of the arrangement. Then he saw her. Lily was spinning in slow circles in the marble foyer, looking up at the huge chandelier like it was the most magical thing she had ever seen. Her dark curls bounced with each turn. She wore a yellow dress with a small stain on the front, and mismatched socks, one pink and one with tiny stars. "Mama, look. It's like stars inside the house," she said, pointing up. Elena rushed over, scooping her daughter up with an apologetic look toward the study door. "I'm so sorry, sir. She's never seen a house this big. I'll keep her in the kitchen, I promise." Marcus opened his mouth to say something sharp. Instead, what came out surprised even him. "It's fine," he said. "Let her look." Elena blinked, unsure she had heard him correctly. But she nodded, whispered a thank you, and carried Lily toward the kitchen, glancing back once at the man in the wheelchair who was still watching the spot where the little girl had been spinning. For the rest of that day, Marcus found himself listening for small footsteps. He told himself it was simply curiosity, a break in the monotony. But that night, lying alone in his enormous bed, in his enormous empty house, he thought about the way Lily had looked at the chandelier like it held stars, and for the first time in 3 years, he fell asleep without the heavy, familiar weight of grief pressing on his chest. He did not know it yet, but something in the frozen part of his heart had already begun, very quietly, to crack. Over the following days, Elena kept Lily close, mostly in the kitchen or the small staff sitting room, terrified of upsetting her employer. But children do not stay where they are put, especially curious 3-year-olds in houses full of wonders. Lily wandered. She found the library with its ladder that reached the ceiling. She found the garden with its stone fountain shaped like a swan. And more than once, she found her way to the study, where a quiet man in a wheelchair sat behind a desk, staring at papers he was not really reading. The first few times, Marcus sent her back to her mother, gently but firmly. He was not ready. He was not a man who let small, warm things into his cold, careful world. But Lily was patient in the way only small children can be. She did not understand walls built from grief. She only understood that the sad man in the chair looked lonely, and in her 3-year-old heart, lonely people needed a friend. She kept coming back. By the second week, Lily had stopped asking permission to visit the study. She would simply appear in the doorway, drag over a small ottoman, and sit near Marcus's desk with a coloring book, humming softly to herself while he worked or pretended to. At first, Marcus tolerated it because objecting felt like more effort than it was worth. But slowly, without meaning to, he began to look forward to the sound of her humming. It filled the silence of the study in a way that felt less like intrusion and more like company. One afternoon, Lily held up a drawing, crayon lines scribbled with the confidence only a toddler has. "This is you," she announced proudly, pointing to a purple stick figure with a huge smile. Marcus glanced at it. "I don't smile like that." "You will," Lily said simply, as if this were an obvious fact of the universe, and went back to coloring. Marcus stared at her for a long moment. Something about her certainty unsettled him, in a way that was not entirely unpleasant. Elena, meanwhile, was living in constant quiet fear. Every day she expected Mr. Hale's assistant to tell her the arrangement was over, that her daughter's presence was inappropriate, that she should look for work elsewhere. Every day the dismissal did not come. She began to notice small things. The way the house felt different when Lily was in it. The way once she thought she heard Mr. Hale actually laugh, a short surprised sound quickly stifled, coming from the study. She did not dare hope it meant anything. Rich men were unpredictable, and she could not afford to lose this job over foolish hope. But Lily had already decided that Marcus was her friend. And to a 3-year-old, friendship comes with certain responsibilities. She brought him her favorite crackers at snack time, insisting he eat the good half. She brought him drawings almost daily, each one featuring the purple stick figure smiling wider than the last. She told him elaborate stories about her stuffed rabbit, named Buttons, who apparently had many adventures involving dragons and, inexplicably, a talking sandwich. Marcus found himself answering her. Really answering, not just the polite, distant responses he gave to adults. He asked Buttons the rabbit follow-up questions about the dragon. He complimented the purple stick figure's very large smile. Something in him, buried under years of careful numbness, began cautiously to wake up. One rainy afternoon, Elena came to collect Lily from the study and found her daughter standing beside the wheelchair, one small hand resting on Marcus's arm, looking up at him with wide, serious eyes. "Are you sad because your legs don't work?" Lily asked. The study went very still. Elena froze in the doorway, mortified, already forming an apology. Marcus looked down at the little girl, at her open, guileless face, and felt something twist painfully in his chest. He had spent 3 years perfecting his careful sadness for adults, who never asked direct questions, who tiptoed around his condition with polite, empty sympathy. Nobody had simply asked him plainly if that was why he was sad. "I'm sad about something else," he said quietly. It was, in its own strange way, the most honest thing he had said out loud in years. Lily considered this with the great seriousness of a very small philosopher. Then she climbed, without asking, into his lap, tucking herself against his chest the way children do when they decide, instinctively, that someone needs comfort. "It's okay," she said, patting his arm. "I get sad too. But then Mama hugs me and it gets smaller." Marcus sat frozen, his arms hovering awkwardly, unsure what to do with the warm, solid weight of a child curled trustingly against him. He had not been touched with such simple, unguarded affection in 3 years. Diane used to hug him like that, without agenda, without pity, just because she loved him. Slowly, carefully, as if he might break something, Marcus wrapped his arms around Lily and held her. Elena stood in the doorway, tears filling her eyes, watching her daughter do something no doctor, no therapist, no well-meaning friend had managed to do in 3 years. She was holding a broken man together, one small hug at a time, and she did not even know she was doing it. From that day forward, something shifted in the house. Marcus began asking about Lily when she was not there. He had a small table and chair set brought into the study, sized just for her, with a shelf of picture books he had personally, secretly researched and ordered online. He told himself it was simply kindness toward an employee's child. He did not yet let himself examine the fuller truth, the way his chest now ached with something dangerously close to hope, the way he found himself, for the first time in years, wanting to get better. But wanting was not the same as doing. The chair was still a shield, and shields, once built, are hard to lower, even for a little girl with a chewed-eared rabbit and a smile too big to be ignored. To understand why Marcus could not stand, you had to understand the rain. It had been raining the night Diane died. A soft, ordinary rain, the kind that barely warranted an umbrella. They had been driving home from her sister's baby shower, Diane laughing about something, one hand resting on her round belly, 7 months along with their daughter. Marcus remembered the laugh most of all. He remembered thinking, in that ordinary, unremarkable moment, that he was the luckiest man alive. Then the truck ran the red light. He remembered very little of the crash itself, just fragments. The sound, a sound he still heard sometimes in his sleep. The way the world tilted. The silence afterward, so much worse than any sound. He walked away with a broken wrist and a concussion. Diane and their daughter did not walk away at all. The guilt had settled into him like poison. He had been driving. He had chosen the route home. In some illogical, grief-shattered corner of his mind. His legs, the very things that had carried him safely from a crash that killed his family, felt like a betrayal. Why should his legs work, when hers never would again? Why should he walk through the world, when his daughter would never take a single step in it? A specialist, 3 months after the accident, had explained gently that this could happen. Trauma could paralyze without physical injury, could convince a healthy body to shut down as if the mind itself were trying to punish it or protect it or both. With therapy, the doctor said, there was every chance Marcus could walk again. Marcus had listened, nodded, and then quietly decided not to try. It was not about ability. It was about deserving. And some broken part of him had decided, in the wreckage of that October night, that he did not deserve to walk through a world without them in it. For 3 years he had let the world believe he could not. It was easier than explaining he would not. Pity was simpler than judgment. Nobody questioned a grieving widower in a wheelchair. Everybody, however, would question a man who could walk and chose the darkness instead. Elena did not know any of this. She only knew fragments, gathered from careful staff gossip, that Mr. Hale had lost his wife and unborn child in an accident, that the wheelchair had appeared some time after. She assumed, as everyone did, that his legs simply did not work anymore. But children, Marcus was learning, saw things adults had trained themselves not to see. One evening, working later than usual, Elena found her daughter had wandered off again, this time toward the West Wing, where an old nursery sat locked and untouched, exactly as it had been prepared 3 years ago for a baby who never came home. Elena hurried after her, heart pounding, terrified of what memories that room might stir. She found Lily standing outside the nursery door. Not inside it, simply staring at a small brass nameplate that had been mounted and never removed. It read in careful script, "Grace's room." "Whose room is that?" Lily asked when her mother reached her, breathless. Elena did not know what to say. Behind them, the soft sound of wheels on hardwood announced Marcus's approach. He had heard the small voice from down the hall and something had pulled him toward it, some instinct he did not fully understand. He stopped his chair a few feet away. Looking at the nameplate he had not been able to look at directly in 3 years. "That was going to be my daughter's room," he said quietly. His voice did not shake, but it cost him something to keep it steady. Her name was going to be Grace. Elena's hand flew to her mouth. "Sir, I'm so sorry, we'll go, I didn't mean." "It's all right," Marcus said, and to his own surprise he meant it. Lily, unbothered by the heaviness in the air the way only small children can be, walked over and took his hand in both of hers. "Grace is a pretty name," she said simply. "I bet she would have liked hugs like me." Something broke open in Marcus's chest, not painfully, but like a window finally letting in air after being sealed shut for years. He had not spoken his daughter's name out loud since the funeral. He had certainly never imagined he would speak it standing or sitting in front of her empty nursery, holding the small hand of another little girl who somehow, impossibly, understood grief without needing to be told what it was. "Yeah," Marcus said, his voice rough. "I think she would have." That night, after Elena had taken Lily home, Marcus sat alone in his study for a long time, staring at nothing. For the first time in 3 years, he let himself cry, not the careful, controlled tears he sometimes allowed in private, but real, racking sobs that emptied something old and rotten out of him. He did not notice at first that his legs had shifted slightly beneath the desk, an old habit resurfacing, muscle memory reminding him that they had always been capable, waiting patiently beneath 3 years of grief for permission to move again. The accident that changed everything happened on a Thursday, 3 weeks after the visit to the nursery. Elena had brought Lily to work as usual, settling her at the small table in the study with crayons and a coloring book while she attended to the upstairs bedrooms. Marcus was on a video call in the adjoining office, door slightly ajar, glancing over periodically to check on his small, self-appointed companion. What none of them accounted for was the latter. The study connected to a small private library, 2 stories of shelves reached by a rolling ladder Marcus had not used in years. Lily, curious as always, had wandered in, drawn by a row of picture books on a low shelf. But her eye caught something higher up, a colorful spine that looked interesting, and in the innocent, fearless logic of a 3-year-old, she decided to climb. She was 3 rungs up when the ladder, old and improperly locked, began to roll. Marcus heard the shift in sound before he understood what it meant. A creak, a small startled gasp, and then Lily's frightened cry as the ladder rolled and tilted, her small hands losing their grip. He did not think. He did not remember in the moment, 3 years of careful paralysis, 3 years of guilt convincing his body that it did not deserve to move. He saw a falling child, and something ancient and instinctive in him overrode everything else. Marcus stood up. His legs, weak from years of disuse, nearly buckled beneath him, but adrenaline is a powerful thing, and grief, it turned out, was no match for a father's instinct, buried but never truly gone. He crossed the room in 3 unsteady, desperate strides and caught Lily just before she hit the hardwood floor, absorbing the fall with his own body, twisting so that he took the brunt of the impact against his shoulder rather than letting her small body strike the ground. They landed together in a tangle, Lily crying from fright more than pain, Marcus gasping, his shoulder throbbing. His legs trembling violently beneath him from years of disuse, suddenly asked to perform a miracle. Elena came running at the sound of the crash, and stopped dead in the doorway, staring at the impossible sight before her. Marcus Hale on the floor, on his own 2 legs, cradling her sobbing daughter against his chest. You're standing," Elena whispered, her voice shaking. Marcus looked up at her, his own face pale with shock, as if he too could not quite believe what his body had just done. For 3 years he had told himself, told everyone, that this was impossible. And yet here he was, kneeling on the floor of his library, legs trembling but undeniably, unmistakably beneath him. "Mama!" Lily wailed, and Elena rushed forward, scooping her daughter into her arms, checking her over frantically for injuries, finding only a small scrape on her elbow and a great deal of fright. "She's all right," Marcus said, his voice unsteady. "She's all right, I caught her eye." He stopped, staring down at his own legs as if they belonged to a stranger. Elena looked between her shaken daughter and her employer, kneeling impossibly on the floor, and understanding began to dawn on her face, slow and painful. "You can walk," she said quietly. It was not quite an accusation, but it was not entirely without hurt either. "You've been able to walk this whole time." Marcus closed his eyes. There was no more hiding now, no more careful shield of pity and distance. The truth sat exposed between them, raw and undeniable. "Yes," he admitted, his voice breaking. "I can walk. I've been able to for a long time. I couldn't make myself do it. Not until..." He looked down at Lily, who had stopped crying and was now watching him with wide, curious eyes, her small hand still gripping a fistful of his shirt. "Not until I thought she was going to get hurt." Elena sat back on her heels, holding her daughter close, processing 3 years of assumed disability, 3 years of quiet pity for a man who had chosen, for reasons of his own, not to stand. She was not angry, not exactly. She understood grief well enough to know it made people do strange, self-punishing things. But she was overwhelmed and frightened by how close her daughter had come to serious injury, and uncertain what any of this meant for her job, her daughter's safety, her own careful, hard-won stability. "I think," she said slowly, helping Lily to her feet, checking the scrape on her elbow again, "we need to talk. All of us. But not today. Today I just need to take my daughter home." Marcus nodded, still trembling, still sitting on the floor of his library on legs that had not held his weight properly in 3 years. "Elena," he said as she turned to go, "thank you for letting her into this house. I know I didn't deserve that gift, but she gave it to me anyway." Elena paused in the doorway, Lily's small hand in hers, and looked back at the broken, healing man on the floor. "She has a habit of doing that," she said softly. "Giving people gifts they don't think they deserve." That night, alone in his enormous house, Marcus stood at his bedroom window on legs that ached with the unfamiliar effort of simply holding him upright, and looked out at the dark garden below. For 3 years he had been waiting, without realizing it, for permission to come back to life. He had gotten that permission not from a doctor, not from a therapist, but from a 3-year-old girl who did not know enough about grief to understand that his legs were not supposed to work, and so, quite simply, they did. The days following the fall were quiet, careful ones. Elena did not immediately return to work, taking 2 days to sit with what had happened, to reassure herself Lily was truly unharmed, to decide what any of it meant for her small, fragile family's future. Marcus spent those 2 days in physical therapy, arranged urgently and privately, working with a specialist to rebuild 3 years of atrophied strength in muscles that had been ready, all along, to carry him forward. Every session was painful. Every session. He thought of a small hand gripping his shirt, of a purple stick figure smiling too wide to be believed, of a girl who told him, with complete toddler certainty, that he would smile like that too someday. When Elena finally returned, nervous and uncertain, Lily in tow, she found Marcus waiting for them in the foyer, standing beneath the very chandelier Lily had once spun beneath, believing it held stars. He was not perfectly steady. He leaned slightly on a cane the therapist had recommended for these early days. But he was standing on his own 2 legs, waiting for them. "Lily," he said, and something in his voice, warm and open in a way it had never been in 3 years, made Elena's breath catch. Lily broke free from her mother's hand and ran across the foyer, and Marcus, still unsteady, still relearning the mechanics of a body long unused, knelt carefully to catch her, laughing, actually laughing, as she collided into him with all the enthusiastic force a 3-year-old could manage. "You're standing," Lily said, delighted, as if this were the most wonderful surprise in the world. "I told you you would smile like that. I told you." Marcus held her close, his throat tight with emotion he no longer tried to hide. "You did tell me," he agreed. "You were right." Elena stood back, watching, tears slipping down her cheeks despite herself. In her arms, she carried the weight of complicated feelings, relief, wonder, and beneath it all a growing cautious hope she had not let herself feel in a very long time. Marcus looked up at her over Lily's dark curls. "I owe you an explanation," he said. "A real one. And an apology for letting you believe something that wasn't true, even if I didn't fully understand why myself, not until recently." Over tea in the sunroom that afternoon, while Lily napped on a nearby couch, exhausted from her joyful reunion, Marcus told Elena everything. About Diane. About Grace. About the guilt that had convinced his body it did not deserve to carry him through a world his wife and daughter would never see. About 3 years of careful practiced paralysis, easier to live inside than the raw, unbearable truth of his grief. "I'm not proud of it," he admitted. "Deceiving everyone, deceiving myself. But I didn't know how to stop. Not until your daughter started asking me questions nobody else dared to ask. Not until she decided, for reasons I still don't fully understand, that I was someone worth loving anyway." Elena listened, and when he finished, she reached across the small table and covered his hand with hers, a simple human gesture of comfort between two people who had both known profound loss. "Grief does strange things to us," she said gently. "I'm not going to pretend I'm not still processing what almost happened to Lily. That scared me more than I can say. But I've watched my daughter fall in love with you these past weeks, in the uncomplicated way children love, and I've watched you become someone softer, someone more present because of her. I don't think that's something to apologize for. I think it might be something to be grateful for." In the months that followed, Marcus's recovery continued, slow and steady, each week bringing more strength back into legs that had waited patiently for 3 years to be trusted again. He returned, cautiously, to parts of his life he had abandoned. He visited Diane and Grace's graves for the first time since the funeral, standing at the headstone on his own 2 feet, telling them, quietly, about a little girl with a chewed-eared rabbit who had taught him how to come back from the dead. Elena kept her job, though the dynamics of the household shifted in ways neither of them had quite expected. Lily became a permanent, joyful fixture in the mansion, no longer confined to the kitchen or the small staff sitting room, but welcomed everywhere, her laughter finally, fully allowed to echo through halls that had been silent for far too long. And slowly, carefully, something grew between Marcus and Elena too, not rushed, not forced, but built patiently on shared grief, mutual respect, and the undeniable, glowing thread of love that a small child had woven between them without ever meaning to. One evening, nearly a year after Lily first spun beneath the chandelier believing it held stars, Marcus stood in that same foyer, steady now on his own 2 legs, watching Elena help Lily out of her coat after a day at preschool. The little girl, now 4, spotted him and came running, exactly as she always did. And exactly as he always did, Marcus knelt to catch her. "Guess what?" Lily announced, breathless with the important business of being 4. "I drew you again. But this time you're not sitting down. You're standing up, and you're holding my hand, and Mama's hand too." She held up the drawing, 3 purple stick figures standing together beneath a bright yellow sun, all 3 smiling too wide to be believed. Marcus looked at the drawing, then at Elena, who was watching him with soft, hopeful eyes, and felt his own too wide, impossible smile spread across his face, the same one a determined 3-year-old had promised him, all that time ago, that he would someday wear. "It's perfect," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "It's exactly right. And for the first time in 3 years, standing tall in the golden evening light of a house that had finally, truly become a home, Marcus Hale believed, completely and without reservation, that he did.